Hi everyone, welcome to the HSC Year 11 English lecture by ATA Notes. This is a January lecture series and my name is Aditi and I'll be taking you through this lecture today. So first of all, once again, a very warm welcome to everyone from all of us here at ATA Notes. It is wonderful to be back for another lecture series and I hope you guys are having a wonderful start to the year and also enjoying the holidays and taking some time to recuperate and rejuvenate before school begins and before you jump into the madness of year 11. So let's get started. Now before we do, I just quickly like to introduce you to all the resources that we have to offer here at ATA Notes. So all our free resources include things like study notes. So you've got hundreds of downloadable study notes from our website. So they're posted up by your peers, and it's obviously a very nice community where people share their notes, help each other out. We have discussions and discussion forums where again you get to talk to and work with like-minded people. We obviously also have the lectures on this week, so sign up to as many lectures as that are relevant to you. You can always sign up to the year 11 lectures, to the year 12 lectures as well. I'm assuming that most of you will be going into year 11 this year who are viewing this lecture, but if you're in year 10 or year 9 and you just want to get a feel for what is year 11, that is absolutely okay. And in fact it's a great start. It's really good to go in prepared and knowing what you sort of what is going to be expected of you. Same way, have a look at some year 12 lectures so you can get a bit of an understanding of the content of the structure, and that can always be really helpful. We also have online videos as well as newsletters and articles that are written by us here at ATA Notes, and they include study strategies and tips. So check it out. Check out all the resources that we have available on our website. Now, we also have thousands of study resources that are available on ATA Notes Plus. So ATA Notes Plus is our own ATA Notes Plus is our own resource where we essentially, sorry, I'm just going to check for one thing, which is my battery. Okay, I think it's charging. Yes, apologies for that. Sorry, as I was saying, so thousands of study resources available at ATA Notes Plus. That includes our study guides and our study guides. It includes text guides as well as topic test questions. So what was previously part of Edit Limited that you may have heard of, it's now all on ATA Notes Plus, and along with our study guides, we also have flashcards that are available now for a variety of subjects, and our own AI answer bot, which essentially takes information from our books and can help you out. So check it out. You can check it out. You can check out ATA Notes Plus and have a look at any resources that are relevant to your subject and courses. So let's have a start at today's lecture, and quickly before I begin, I'll just introduce myself again. My name is Aditi. You may have seen me in the previous English lectures. I've taken the year 10 and also the year 9 sorry, the year 10 and the year 9 lecture, so you may have seen me there. But yeah, I graduated in 2021 as DAX with an 8 of 95, and the subjects that I tutor are English Extension, Advanced, PDH, PE and Biology. So here at TuteSmart I tutor English Advanced and Biology, and I'm currently at the University of Sydney studying a Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Advanced Studies in Medical Science, and my two majors are Medical Science and Political Economy. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, whether that's about uni or any of my subjects, or I can always answer any questions. So a couple of sort of housekeeping things. Firstly, this lecture is it is recorded, so you will you'll be seeing the live stream of the lecture. So it's recorded, but I will be live on the I will be live, or actually one of our other English tutors will be live to answer your questions on the day. So if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask, and we can help you out in any way possible. So you will have Kayla, who will be live helping you out on the chat, and you can ask her any questions, and she is amazing. She knows what she's doing, really good at what she does, and she can help you out with any of the English with any of the questions relating to English, relating to you can always ask her what she's doing at uni. So that's basically sort of the housekeeping. So it is a recorded session, but we are live answering your questions, and you will be able to access this recording on the same page after the lecture finishes. I believe for a week you'll be able to do that, and then after that the lecture gets shifted to 800 notes plus. So let's have a look at what we're going to do today. So here is our game plan. We're going to break this lecture up into 4 parts. The first part, we're going to talk about how to actually approach HSC English, and that includes what to expect, what high achievers do, and a game plan. And I think this first part is really important, because there is it is quite a huge jump from year 10 to year 11, and sort of knowing what to do, knowing what is coming at you can be really helpful, and it can help you feel really grounded as well. Content block 2 will look at a module specifically, and we're going to look at introducing reading to write, which is one of the key modules in year 11. We'll go through what it is, what it involves, what you have to do, and so on. And then content block 3, we're going to focus specifically on essay writing. So we're just going to focus on the foundations of essay writing, and you can then apply that knowledge to both module A and module B. And we'll look at how to build from our foundations, how to structure a band 6 essay. We'll also talk through some exemplars and look at how we can create a criteria to sort of judge ourselves, or rather to mark ourselves. And finally, content block 4 will talk about note taking, and also I'll give you some practice questions to have a look at. So let's get started without further ado. One quick thing that I remembered is that you'll also be able to access these slides just on the page where you're viewing this this session. So check that out as well. And I apologize in advance, I've got a bit of a sore throat, so I apologize for the coughing and the sneezing if that happens as well. So let's get started. The HSC paper. So this is the end game. This is what you are going to finish off with. This is the last thing, that last step, that final hurdle, which you need to jump over, and that's going to be at the end of year 12, and this is it. This is basically everything builds up to this paper. It sounds very extreme, it kind of is, but that's sort of the truth, right? Everything builds up to this paper. So let's have a look at what it actually consists of. So firstly, there are going to be 2 English papers. So the only subject where you're doing 2 papers, and that's going to be over 2 days. So the first day of the HSC is always English paper 1, and paper 1 is what we call text and human experiences. So that's the module, and it is also known as the common module. And within this paper, you are given 10 minutes reading time, and there are 2 sections to the paper. The first section is a set of short answer questions. For now, just think of them as a bit of comprehension style questions, but obviously it's a bit more sophisticated than that, you know, in year 12 after all. However, it's kind of similar. So it's that vibe of comprehension style questions in a way, and that's going to be that first section. You will be given unseen text you haven't seen before, more than likely, because they do tend to choose obscure texts. So you're going to be given unseen text, and you have to respond to those questions. And this section, they tell you to aim for about 45 minutes. So they never say that, you know, you only have 45 minutes for the section, but for the overall paper you have 90 minutes. So we just split that up. Section 1 about 45 minutes. And it's worth 20 marks, that first section. The second section is also worth 20 marks, and this is where you're writing a full essay that is based on your prescribed text. So this year, towards the end of this year, when you begin year 12 in term 4, you'll be given more than likely you'll be given a common module text, because that's the first module that students do. You'll be given that text, you will read it, you'll go through it, you will link it back to text and human experiences, and basically this module is about how how human experiences are represented in text, right? So you're going to link all of that back to your you're going to link all of that back to your text, and that's going to be section 2. So 2 sections, section 1, unseen questions, section 2, essay question. So again, the 2 key skills that we can see that are going to be imperative here includes, firstly, that ability to respond to different texts and be able to extract techniques from it. So you'll be focusing a lot on analysis this year and next year, because that analysis is really important. And for section 1, you kind of have to do it on the spot, right? You have to do all of this on the spot. And then section 2 is the essay question. So being able to write a full essay based on your prescribed text in those 45 minutes. It's pretty like time bias as well. It's definitely a bit challenging, but you'll get there with practice. So second paper happens on the second day of the HSC, paper 2. Paper 2 is the modules. So you study, essentially you study, sorry, I'm just checking my charging. I don't know why it's so light. I just might quickly check my charger. No, it's fine, sorry. Okay, where was I? So paper 2, the modules. So you will study the common module more than likely in term 1, and the common module will be common to all, like between English Advanced and Standard. So it will be common between the 2 Englishes. So you'll study that. The question will be the same for paper 1, but paper 2 is different because the modules differ. So as you would know, this lecture is Year 11 English. It's not Year 11 English Advanced or Standard, because we are looking at the basics of Year 11 English. And you know, all of the things that we look at, the essay writing, the approach, it's all civilized, just what you actually study and the quality of your writing and essays, that is what really differs between standard and advanced. So section 1, so essentially you're going to have 3 sections, because there are 3 modules in year 12. So there are 4 modules altogether. The first one's common mod, then we have module A, module B, and module C. Those are the 4 modules. You do and essentially schools choose to do them like in whatever order they want to, but usually you start off with common mod, you then go into mod A, B, and C, and this is how the paper is structured. The first section here is going to be worth 20 marks, 40 minutes, and this is going to be an essay question. Section 2 is also an essay question worth 20 marks, and you're only given 40 minutes to write that essay. Section 3 is worth 20 marks as well. You're given 40 minutes, or you are again suggested to use 40 minutes, because the whole paper is worth 120 minutes, so 2 hours. So section 3, again, 20 marks, 40 minutes, and you can be given a part A only, which is just like in module C, the section 3 question, module C is craft of writing. So you will be more than likely composing a text, and that could be an imaginative text, a persuasive text, a creative text, or an informative text. Usually it is creative or discursive, and we're going to talk about what they are soon as well. But nevertheless, you are going to be essentially answering that. They could either be just writing a piece, or they could also be writing a piece and then writing a reflection as well, and that's another big part of module C. So we can see that it is certainly very it feels like it's full on, and it is, but remember, you're not going to write the HSC tomorrow. You are going to work towards it over the next year and over the next 2 years, really, if you are in year 11 this year. So you're going to work through it and then get to that point. So don't stress, don't be overwhelmed. You'll feel really comfortable with this as time goes by. So now let's have a look at how to actually approach HSC English. First of all, it is compulsory. So because it's compulsory, you will be consumers of media, and you have been consumers of media your whole lives, right? We have it's intertwined with who we are, like, reading books, watching movies, TV shows, YouTube's advertising, news media. Everything is essentially media. It's stimuli. It's trying to tell us something. It's trying to, have a certain effect. And English is the only subject in school where you do get to play with some pretty big ideas. You get to, I personally think you have a lot of fun with English if you approach it like that. If you actually try to think about, what is the text trying to tell me, what am I going to take away from it, why is it what is the purpose of it. So asking those big questions, there's a lot of room for creativity and for fun in HSC English. So that brings us to the first key point of HSC English. It's the fact that English is about you. It is not about what your teacher thinks. It is not about what your friends think. It is certainly not about what anyone else thinks. English is about your personal opinion. So English is about your personal opinion, so you and your ideas. So you are free to interpret them in any way that you like. You're not bound by anyone else's opinions or ideas. And I think that, again, is another fun part of English, is that you can essentially have any idea that you like. You can interpret the text however you like, as long as you have evidence to back it up. That's English. So then it comes to essentially, let's have a look at some of these myths that we're told about HSC English that, add to the stressor of it. So firstly, we're told that generally English is a complex subject. We require philosophical arguments to earn a Band 6. Letter rubbish. We don't, right? Your arguments have to reflect your understanding, and they reflect your understanding if you put out a point, you back that point up with your textual analysis, and you reiterate that. That's telling the marker that, hey, this was in the text, this is how I interpret it, this is what I think this means, this is how I think the author is trying to achieve their purpose, and therefore this is how I have engaged with the text. So that genuine reflection on your own learning, that will help you. Arguments that do that, those arguments are going to get you Band 6s, that show the marker that you've engaged with the text, that you've thought it through. Second big myth is that you need to sound academic, and I'd fallen for it too. And I was just like, oh, how do I do that, right? Like, do I read a dictionary or something? And it's like, not really. You don't. Like, yes, having a more widespread vocabulary can be helpful. It can certainly allow you to express yourself better. However, at the same time, we do not need to be writing like we are scholars, like we are, academics who've done their masters and PDHP and PhDs, in literature. We haven't, right? We're just high school students. We haven't. So you don't have to sound super academic and professional and use all these big words, because remember, you'd rather use common words, and common words that actually allow you to express your point, then try to use fancy words that jumble up your argument, because with fancy words you have to be careful, because it can certainly jumble up your argument if you don't know like the context in which you're using them. So you don't need to sound like an academic, you just need to sound like you, sound like someone who has engaged with the text, who knows what they're talking about, and who can back that up with evidence from the text. And finally, the biggest myth is that if you are not good at English, there is no way to be better. Again, tell no to rubbish, because that's not true, right? That's not true with anything in life, let alone just English. You can always get better. You can always get better. And there are so many ways and so many opportunities to get better. Like, even if you get to year 12 and you see that your internal marks are not the best, or maybe in year 10 they weren't the best, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure if this is for me, or you might experience that in year 11, because it is a jump. So you may experience that your marks aren't the best, you're trying your best, but it's just not coming out. It happens, it's a jump. It happens, you just have to work through it. And this is one of the key things that I told my year 12s, like one of the most common questions that I'll get, for example, in the year 12 English advanced lecture, is that especially closer to like the HSCs, like the July lectures, I'd get lots of questions about my internal marks aren't very good, right? So with the HSC, 50% of it, like 50% of your marks are determined by your internal assessments. So that includes like the 4 assignments or, exams or whatever you will do in school. And 50% of it is what you do on the day of the HSC, like what you write in that paper. So my key thing is that, you know what, even if it hasn't been the best, even if you haven't been happy with how you've been doing, that's okay, because 50% of your marks are still locked away until the day you walk into the HSC room. And same thing with year 11, like it is a practice run in a way for year 12. So don't be too hard on yourself. Don't limit yourself by thinking that I'm not going to get better at it. That's not true. If you consistently try, and I think the key here is consistency. If you consistently try, hell yeah, you can get better. Like, I don't know, I don't think anyone who's wanted, like, especially from my experience with students, like I've seen students improve drastically just by doing little things. And sometimes that can include things like just studying more efficiently. Like, if you're just gonna sit there and read your notes, that's not gonna work in English. That won't work in English at all, because English is not that kind of subject. Best way to improve at English, and I will tell you this now, write it down in bold. Best way, and really the only key way to improve in English, is to write essays. A, write essays. B, get feedback. Oh, rather, firstly, write essays. Secondly, get feedback on those essays. Thirdly, write them again. That's it. That is literally it. 3 steps to get better at English. Write essays, get feedback from a teacher, preferably a teacher. You can ask a friend to look over it for you, but a teacher would be better, because they obviously know what they're doing more than your friend would. No offense to your friend, but obviously a teacher would know better. Unless your friend is a teacher, or you've got a family friend who's a teacher, then absolutely ask them. Get that feedback and then just work on it. That's it. English, you can you could see from like the HSC paper structure that we went through. Paper 2 is like, what, it's 66% essays, right? Like, that's your essay. Common module, paper 1, half of it is an essay. Like, really, if we think about it, with English, 60% more of, well, yeah, 66% of it is basically essays. So if you can get those essays up to notch, if you can write them, get feedback on it, work on them, you can go into that room with some really good marks. The other 2, unseen questions, again, practice. Practice doing lots of unseen questions. There are lots out there. And with module C, with writing, same thing, practice. So it's a very, I think with English, like it's a very, like, it's an easy subject to improve in, because it just requires you to just do that one thing over and over again until you become better at it. Like, I think that's yeah, it's not like, for example, chem or bio, where you, or I would say chem more than bio, because I also did chem. You know, it's not like chem where you have to essentially, like, it's sometimes hard to wrap your head around some of those concepts. I don't think that's the case with English, especially because literally 90% of it is your own opinion. So you shouldn't have trouble wrapping your head around your own opinion. If you do, maybe you might require a reread of the text, but you shouldn't have trouble. Yeah, like it's easy. It's easy because you can, because it's your own opinion, right? Like, it's your own personal idea of a text. And I love that about English. It's whatever you think is right, and as long as you back it up, as long as you can write about it, you are going to get the marks. It's unlike math, where there's only, more than likely, there's usually only one answer, and you just have to get that answer and hit it on the head with an L. That's not English. There's so many possibilities. There's so many ways to get a band 6. So many different essays and essay styles and essay structures that will aid you to get a band 6. So do not limit yourself. Do not limit yourself. Do not do not get into the mindset that if I'm not good at it, I'm not going to get better at it. Just chuck that out even before you head into year 11. If you've had a pretty bad, year 10, year 9 English journey, just leave it out the door. You're walking into a new door, don't take that baggage with you, just leave it out. Approach it from a fresh perspective, and I can bet you're gonna get there. So that's that. Let's move on then, and let's talk about personal voice. So important, because this is what's getting you the marks. But what do I mean by personal voice, right? Like, what the heck is that? So let's have a look. So you have most probably studied a text in class and discussed some, common themes, experiences, ideas in the text. You've done that the past 2 years, and gotten an understanding of how to maybe deconstruct text. Like, that's one of the key skills you might learn in year 10. From what I remember in year 10, I think we deconstructed a movie, which had Reese Witherspoon and I what's his name? The first Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire. Yep. So that was the movie we deconstructed, and I really remember it because, you've studied that text, you discuss its themes, you discuss ideas, you discuss experiences, and you write about them. You would have written about them in an essay. Again, would have been one of your first times probably writing an essay. You may have been asked to talk about it in another media or form. So more than likely your arguments and ideas would have been very similar to your peers, because you would have probably discussed things as a class, so you would have written about similar things. You may have used similar evidence or similar scenes from a movie or similar quotes from a text, and the evidence used, again, could be very commonly used evidence, like I said, and you may have also expressed a very neutral opinion. Or more than that, it may have been more of an informative thing where you are talking about the ideas in the text rather than actually expressing your opinion about it, or rather than saying, okay, this is what, this is why is this happening, this is why I think this scene is shot this way in the scene, this is why I think this scene is shot in a particular way in the movie to have a particular effect. That is your personal voice. That is your opinion about it. And in year 11 and 12, that will be the major shift that we focus on. It is about articulating your own nuanced opinions and understandings of the text. That is HSC English for you guys. It's about expressing your own opinions, your own ideas about the text. Those that are specific to you, those that are unique to you. And that means your ideas will be different to your peers in some ways. And this is where discussing your ideas, arguing about them in obviously a constructive way, and like really engaging with them. This is where that comes into into play, and you should feel very comfortable articulating your point, because you are arguing your own views on the text. You're not arguing your teacher's view on the text, you're not arguing your friend's view on the text. You're going to argue for your own view on what you think the text is doing, and that is personal voice. That is what is a key part of HSC English, the marking criteria. So really, really important. And again, it doesn't matter if you're doing advanced or standard. This is the key to a band 6 essay for both advanced and standard. Having a personal voice, that is the key. So let's now think about what you're probably wondering is that, how do we actually have a personal voice? So Aditi, you've talked about it. You've told me that if I have a personal voice, I'm on my way to get a band 6. But what the hell do I do to find one, right? So here are some things that, and some steps you can take to develop your own personal voice. Firstly, engaging in class discussions. Personally, hands down, I think the best way to really I guess to really like wrestle with your own ideas in a way, because you can't express your ideas in a discussion in a class setting if you don't understand it yourselves, and if you don't have a really good understanding of it and a really good depth of it yourself. So for example, if I hadn't done HS English, right, like I'd find it really hard to talk about it right now, right? So it's the same thing, and especially for text in class discussions, I think it's such a good way to add to your own ideas, because not only are you listening, especially if you're going to contribute in class, like it means that not only will you listen to what other people are going to say, but you're going to listen to it, you're going to process it, and you're going to then think about it in your own way. Like, and that process will help you develop your personal voice and your personal understanding of the text, right? So you may be taking part in a class discussion by just listening, and half the time, let's be honest, we know it's just sitting there either like trying to listen, because sometimes it's not always easy to, right? Especially on days where it's like, well, 40 degrees in the classroom and lunch is, 30 minutes away, and you're like, I can't be bothered. We've all been there. We have all been there. So essentially, in class discussions, try and recognize areas of discussion, and think about ways in which that may possibly adhere or not adhere to your ideas, to your opinions, right? And then find those ideas, raise your own points, and having that discussion, that can be so helpful. So my first key advice is to always participate in class discussions, especially when you are deconstructing a text, when you're talking about ideas. I think it's so good to do it. It just really helps you with your own personal voice, with your own ideas. Secondly, visit websites like JSTOR, Google Scholar, academia.com, .edu. So these are websites where you can read scholars and literary critics articles, and see what ideas they have discussed about your topic. So this is where you can access information from people who have, done their masters and PhDs, and actually study these texts in a lot more detail than what we do in class, and actually consider their opinion and use their opinion to add on to your own. So not use their opinion to discount for your lack of own opinion. We don't want to do that. We don't just want to take ideas from critics and be like, oh, that's my idea. That's plagiarism. No, what we want to do is we want to look at once we have our own ideas, go ahead, search these up, add them to your own ideas. Think about how maybe a critic has disagreed with what you think. Think about why they've done that, what that tells you about the text. So that is, again, a very sophisticated and a very advanced way of thinking, and what you'll find also with scholarly articles, fair warning, is that they're not always easy to get into. They're written in, and this is where they're written in that academic, really sophisticated language. So you may find that some of the ideas, like it's hard to understand it, and that's okay. That's not a you thing. That's not like, oh, I can't understand it, I must be so dumb. You're not a critic, you're not an academic, you haven't done masters and PhDs until unless you're some, young genius like young Sheldon who's done it. But I doubt that because there are not very many around. But if you haven't done it, but if you don't understand it, do not stress. Have a look when you look at any of these articles. First thing I would do is have a look at the little abstract at the top, right? Just and that basically highlights what the main purpose of the paper is, right? And then go from there. You don't have to read the whole paper. That's the first thing. Like, write that down. You do not have to read the whole thing. You can skim through it. You can take a single line that really resonates with your own understanding and use that point, right? You don't have to read through the whole thing. They're usually 9, 10, sometimes even more pages long. So no one's expecting you to sit there, read a whole paper. That's not needed at this level. All that's needed is to maybe have a skim of it, see if anything stands out at you. If it doesn't, well and good, move on. If it does, take it and leave. You don't have to stay there combing through the whole thing. That's not the purpose of this exercise, or the suggestion rather. Alrighty, so then also look at websites like, and these ones you'll be more familiar with, of course. Who doesn't love Sparks Notes, Cliff Notes, and other similar websites, and you can read their pages on your text. And this is a really good way to basically like understand, especially if it's before you're reading the actual text. It can give you a good synopsis, or even if it's after, and it can be like a really good summary. So remember, instead of directly lifting from them, again, we don't want to do that. HSC English, we want to avoid it. Rather, instead of lifting from them directly, focus on what you disagree with and unpack your opposing ideas. That is going to help you develop your personal voice. And finally, read other people's unique ideas, perhaps in essays. You can also find that on adanotes.com, on our website. And the unique ideas, like reading other people's unique ideas, also links back to reading critical articles. That's also scholars' unique ideas. Alrighty. So let's move on now, and let's look at the criteria. Let's look at some of the things that we, again, as a marker, as a tutor, these are some things that I look for, right? And this is usually for when someone sends me, and usually when my students send me their practice essays, because I'm not a HSC marker, so I'm like doing this like the real thing. But for feedback, in terms of having a look at essays, here are some things that I always keep an eye on. Firstly, whether a student has their own personal voice. That's really important. And and this always shows in the why part of an argument, right? So if an argument is basically, for example, a normal argument without a personal voice, maybe something like, this is what it is, this is how it's done, and that's it, right? What it is, so the idea, and this is how it's done, the analysis. An essay or a response that has personal voice, that has good personal voice, will be something like, this is what is done, this is how it is done, and this is why it has been done, or why it is effective, or why it is ineffective. And that why, that tells me that the student has personal voice, that they have thought about their opinion. So that first part of my sort of thought process is thinking whether a student has their own personal voice, and the second part is how clearly and effectively is their personal voice argued. So what that may look like includes using distinct and unique evidence to support your view, having multiple pieces of evidence, that's always really important, diverging from common perspectives. And this comes with with experience and with more time that you spend on your text as well. So yeah, so diverging from common perspectives on the text in any way and properly expanding upon the differing perspectives, and finally fully articulating your perspective, fully articulating your point, with flair and confidence. Now remember, that flair and confidence comes from the fact that it is your opinion. You should be able to write about you. You should be able to write about it. You should be able to discuss it. You should be able to give me evidence to back it up. Alrighty, now if you don't feel fully comfortable with the idea of personal voice and in your own ability or understanding of personal voice right now, totally okay. More than likely, this may be the first time you're actually hearing about this concept in so much detail and its importance for next year. So no one expects you to write like an academic. No one is expecting you to write, the first essay that you write to be a band 6 essay. We don't, yeah, that's usually not the case. We get to that level through practice. Like, the first essay you write might be not your very best, but you know that in order to write the best essay that you've ever written, you need to write the first crappy essay. That's just how it is, right? So it is totally okay if you haven't really focused on this idea of personal voice yet. My aim is not to scare you. It is not to intimidate you. It is not to tell you that, hey, if you don't know what personal voice is, or if you don't know how to, what it is or how it works, yeah, you're screwed. That's not how it works. Remember, that is not how it works. That is not what we are aiming for. We are aiming to start thinking about this concept, and especially when you read and watch your year 11 text, it's to think about what are some things I agree with, what are things that I disagree with, why do I disagree with them, and that initial thought process will get you to the point where you are confidently writing with personal voice in your essays. And it's a journey, it's a process to get there. It's not something that you just get bang off, from the very beginning. Yep. So again, if you haven't focused on it yet, you will develop the skill. You will develop it, for, year 11 through to year 12. It's not something that you have to nail by the time you get to year 12 and be like ready to go with it. That's not the case, right? It is about that gradual development. It's that gradual process of confidence building and finding your personal voice. It takes time to find it, right? You can't just be like, all right, personal voice, come out, let's do this, right? That's not how it works. So just be easy on yourself, right? So go easy on yourself and stay with the process. It takes time. It's not immediate. It's not instantaneous. So take your time. Remember what personal voice is. That's the key. Remember what it is. Remember why it's important, and consciously try to think about it and apply it to your understanding. Anytime you read a text, anytime you watch a movie, think about, why is it being done? What do I agree with? What do I disagree with? And why do I disagree or agree? So yeah, don't worry too much right now about actually writing your personal voice. That's not the aim. It's about just focusing on this idea, and think of it as like a seed. You've planted the seed and it's going to grow through year 11 and year 12. So don't stress. You can't make a seed grow faster. That's not how it works, right? Like, you can't just be like, all right, I've planted it, I've watered it, let's go. Shoot up into the sky. Like, that's not how trees work. That's not how ideas work. So you've planted it, you know what it is, you understand what it is, you understand why it's important, you understand the processes to get there, and then just slowly start applying it, right? So 2 things to really get into it. Firstly, engage in class discussions. Secondly, read other people's perspectives. Sparks notes, Cliff notes, that's a good place to start. And then slowly, as you start to feel more confident, just dabble a bit into those critical papers, just a bit, right? So just take what you need and get out. You don't have to read it all. So that's that. Let's have a look. Now, when you do finally start writing, ensure that you continually ask for feedback. I've already told you, key way to improve English is to write those practice essays and to get lots of feedback on them. That's literally it. So make sure that you are asking for feedback specifically about the strength of your personal voice as well. That's again really important. And remember that personal voice and how effectively you can support it with textual evidence is what your marker is interested in. It's the number one thing that they are looking for. They're looking for that personal voice, and they're looking for how have you substantiated that with evidence. So it's critical that your personal voice evolves. It will get better. Like I said, the first essay you write won't be top notch, but you have to write that first essay to get to writing a top-notch essay at the end of year 12. That's that. Okay, so a couple of things. Firstly, a good HSC English student will read their text, and this is for those of you out there who don't read their text. It's okay. If you've been doing that in year 9 and 10, you can get away with it, but really important that you read them for year 11 and 12. Like, it's a good practice to get into. Don't get complacent. Don't think that just reading Sparks Notes will give you a good idea. It won't. It's a foundational understanding, but you need to read the text. And if you don't read the text, how will you have your opinion? Like, how will you form opinions about it? How will you develop that personal voice? So you need to read the text. You need to then have opinions about the text, and then ask questions about why what you're reading is significant. So this is like in tandem with the personal voice. Why is this significant? What is it achieving? And 99% of the times this links back to context and an authorial purpose. So think of any text that you sort of read, and let's take Shakespeare as an example, right? Because you have to do Shakespeare in 9 and 10. You also will do Shakespeare in year 11, and then you certainly have to do one Shakespearean text in year 12. So why do we read Shakespeare, right? Like, half the time it's hard to understand what he's even saying in the first place, right? You feel that. Everyone feels that. If you don't, you must have been reading Shakespeare for a long time, or maybe you're pretending that you know what it is, but it's not easy. It's not like reading a young adult novel that you'll just pick up from the store today. Like, it's not the same in any way or form. The writing, the style of writing, the ideas are very different. But when you read the text, when you think about why those ideas exist in the first place, and let's take the example of Macbeth, right? Because that's one text that, again, I would say 90% of us would have studied in year 9 or 10, right? So if you think about Macbeth, if we think about Macbeth, right? So we read the text, and now we want to think about our opinions on the text. Like, what is it trying to tell us? And one of the key things that with Shakespeare that I always really like is that it is essentially, it's rooted in these universal ideas. It's rooted in these ideas that even though we may not live in the same time period, we may not live in the same political circumstances and in the same social circumstances, those key ideas of power, of greed, of betrayal, of manipulation, all of those ideas still remain in our work because they are basic human basic human greeds, basic human sort of, basic part of human nature. And that's why whenever I read Shakespeare, I always, when I think about why is it significant, why am I still studying a text that was written 400 years ago, why the heck is it still relevant? And remember, there were so many texts written 400 years ago, right? It's not just Shakespeare. But why is it that only Shakespeare is in our syllabus? None of the authors from the time, right? So, you may see one or two texts pop up from that time, but it's Shakespeare who is hands down the most prominent. Year 11, year 10, year 12, right? You're studying a Shakespearean text pretty much every year. And why is that? Because it tells us something about the human nature. It tells us something about these universal ideas that haven't changed. That's the significance of Shakespeare. That's his significance. That's why we read it. That's why we have to read it. So always think about why is it significant. And again, 99% of the times, it's gonna link back to context. It's gonna link back to authorial purpose. Read widely. Year 11 is a great opportunity to read widely, to actually dabble into a lot of reading, because it will come in handy in year 12. In terms of what to read, in terms of how many books to read, that's up to you. What to read? Read things that you like, read genres that you like. And you're not always limited to fiction books. You can always read non-fiction. I personally read a bit of both, so you can read that. So in terms of fiction books, I found that reading a couple of classics, personally I really liked them. I really enjoyed them. But classics was always really good. And some of the key texts that have been sustained, like Austen, is great. The Bronte sisters again, so Jane Eyre, or Wuthering Heights. Those are two of the Bronte sisters books. What else you can think about? Obviously classics like Shakespeare. If you are looking for some fun reading, why not pick up Hamlet or I don't know, Othello. You don't have to if you don't want to have a fun reading. I mean, yeah, it kind of goes both ways. Like, I'd definitely read it for school, but it wouldn't be my first choice to be like, okay, I need to read something, let's go for Shakespeare. My first choice, personally, would probably be like Austen or Bronte. I love them. But yeah, other books out there, there's so many out there, so many classics out there. So read. Reading is really good. And even if it's not classics, even if you're like, oh, I don't get it, I don't understand it, the writing and the language, that's totally fine. Read other stuff. Read more contemporary stuff, But I think sometimes reading like acclaimed popular books can, okay, not popular because it's like everyone's reading them, so not like the book talk stuff, that the book TikTok stuff, book talk I think it's called. Yep. So not necessarily that, not that that's bad, but not necessarily that, but like there are lots of books that get, like, for example, Booker prizes. There are so many good books out there, some of them that are acclaimed for a reason. Sometimes reading those popular books can help. And if you just search up like 50 good books to read or something, or 50 however many books to read, you'll get a good list, and it tells you as to why they think it's a good book. So sometimes you can look at the description and be like, oh, I like that, or no, I don't like that, not my thing. So you can choose. Now that doesn't mean you have to read 50. That's a lot, but just however many as you can. But yeah, don't let reading slip. I personally did that in year 12 a bit, but I think it was a bit justified in year 12. But yeah, year 11, read widely, will definitely help. And last thing, write where possible to develop their personal voice. Really, really important. Writing things, even if you're not writing a full essay, and you're in year 11, you may not be doing that many practice essays, but even if you're just reading the text, and just write a paragraph, like literally write one paragraph on a certain idea as to why you disagree with it or why you agree with it, and that's it. And that's really good practice for personal voice. And you can do the same thing by having an opinion, then look at a critic quote or a critic idea, or even like a Sparks Note sort of comment that may be different to your own, and just write about that, and that can help as well. Awesome. Yep. Now, keep these things in mind as you study throughout year 11. Remember, year 11 is that practice run. It definitely is different to year 10, but not very different to year 12. Like, it is a continuation in a way. So no one, remember, can do the work for you. You have to do some hard thinking about the syllabus concepts that we'll look at today, as well as the ideas in your text. So this is now looking at these concepts, looking at these ideas, and then applying it to your text. And you'll be doing that next year with common module, module A, and module B. You have the syllabus, they want you to look at certain ideas, and you're going to apply those ideas to your own text. So some common questions that we usually get asked. How should I be studying for English? How much time should I spend studying for English? What does studying for English actually look like? And finally, what should I do throughout the term to improve in English? And I think I have inevitably answered all of them, or most of them, if not all. But let's have a look. How should I be studying for English? Reading, making notes in your text, really important, and writing little paragraphs. You're starting by little paragraphs, right? How much time should I spend studying? Depends. Prioritize. So if, for example, personally, personally, I honestly didn't have the best year 11. It was 2020, it was COVID had just hit, there was a lot of stuff going on personally, but not the best marks in year 11. However, what I did do was prioritize studying for, and so my subjects were chem, bio, maths advanced and extension, and English extension and advanced, and PDHP. So I personally spent a lot more time on the maths and the chemistry, on maths advanced and especially extension, because it wasn't my strong suit. It was not my strong suit. Definitely needed a lot of work on that, more than I did on English. I'd always loved English, always read a lot, so I felt more comfortable with it than I did with math, for sure. So I did spend more time prioritizing that. Sort of a similar pattern into year 12 as well. Again, prioritize those subjects because they weren't my best. And I think that's how you should approach your studying. It's not absolutely discounting it. It's not like I just completely left English float on its own. Not true. I still did my practice essays, but I knew that there were times where I just had to focus on for example, maths and chem, because it was harder to wrap my head around those concepts, right? So be honest with yourself in terms of where do I need to spend more time, what do I need to do more. Then in terms of what does studying actually look like for English, I think at the beginning of the term when you're reading your text, I think it looks like reading your text, making notes, deconstructing certain scenes, usually certain scenes, certain paragraphs, and then writing those little paragraphs, and then finally coming to a point where you're going to write that essay. What should I do throughout the term to improve in English? Already told you. 3 steps. Write essays, get feedback, write again. That's it. That's literally it. Okay, now let's have a look at a sample game plan. So it's not you have to do this, but I think this is a really good holistic approach to English for the year ahead. So first things first, kind of already spoke about it. Begin by reading or viewing your text. Think about the main ideas, start deconstructing them by yourself. Then engage in class discussions. Think about those ideas, break down other people's ideas, break down your own ideas, and doing that will help you strengthen them. Then develop your notes on the main ideas and themes in the text. That can always be really important. And then do practice writing by responding to different exam style questions, receive feedback, apply feedback, and just that cycle from here to here, just doing that all over again. So how long you should be spending per week on English depends on a lot of things. If you feel like you have a lot of work to improve in English, you need to prioritize the subject. But the time you spend will actually fluctuate depending on assignments, exam periods, holidays, free time. You're not supposed to be a machine who's studying English 24/7. That's not how it's supposed to work, so balance it out. Generally for year 11, I would say about 6 hours per week is a good place to start. It's a good amount, and it just sort of doubles up. I think just you probably add in a couple more hours once it gets to year 12, and that can include obviously reading your text, writing, doing practice essays. But 6 is a good place, and I don't think it's a lot, right? You have 168 hours in the week. 6 hours is pretty manageable for English. Okay, now let's have a look at reading to write. So reading to write, year 2 We'll get to know each other very, very well this year. This is what you have to know. This is the common module for year 11. You will be reading a range of texts which will influence your own craft of writing, and and essentially based on that you will compose imaginative, discursive and persuasive pieces, and then once you do that you will be reflecting on your creative choices and your process, and this will then be a really good segue into the craft of writing in year 12. And remember, the craft of writing was section 3 of the modules papers of paper 2 in the HSC, so it follows through really, really nicely. So in year 11, you are looking at, in this module of reading to write, you're looking at what is the role of storytelling? Why do people write? Why do we do it? And in module C in year 12, essentially that translates into what is your purpose of storytelling. Now, looking at reading other people's work to write, essentially, you're looking at why are people storytelling. Year 12, you're looking now, again, you read other people's work in year 12 as well, but then you equate that, or not equate that, but rather you then use that as inspiration for your own writing, and you consider what is your purpose as a storyteller, and that's the key there. Alrighty, so just a little mid message, or a message in the middle of the lecture. Yeah, don't forget to ask questions. Keep asking questions. No question is a silly question, and don't be afraid to ask questions, and you will hopefully receive really helpful messages back from Kayla. So let's now have a look at the rubric, right, and what that involves. So in terms of, I won't read the whole thing, I'm just going to go through the highlight a bit because that's really important. Wide reading and reflection provides students with the opportunity to make deeper connections and identify distinctions between texts to enhance their understanding of how knowledge of language patterns, structures and features can be applied to unfamiliar texts. So this is all about you being able to read a variety of texts and be able to actually analyze them and deconstruct them and apply your knowledge of language patterns, of writing, of structure, to unfamiliar texts. And this bit here will come into play again in paper 1 of the HSC paper when you're looking at unseen text. And you're going to apply this knowledge to then deconstruct those texts. The second part here is how elements, for example, tone, voice, and image contribute to the way that meaning is made. Again, really important. How are these things working together? How is the text constructed to have a certain meaning? So Nessa wants you to see how composers use different modes of storytelling. So that includes films, novels, artworks, novella, songs, right? So how they use different modes of storytelling to create meaning, to have a certain to have a certain meaning. So this is where we think about what exactly is it about a novel or a film or any piece of media that actually helps create a specific meaning. So for example, if you talk about lyric poetry, right? So lyric poetry is often filled with imagery. It has lots of naturalistic symbolism, and it creates a vivid setting within the reader's mind where they can connect with the poem and be touched by its meaning. So when we so you can notice here that I speak about the conventions of specific modes of storytelling. So lyrical poetry, like the mode, within that mode of storytelling, within the genre, the conventions are imagery, having naturalistic symbolism, and creating that vivid setting. And essentially, we need to be able to link the conventions, like specific conventions, to specific forms. And that is a really key part of actually creating meaning. So then a question is that we need to answer, a question we need to answer isn't only what is the role of storytelling, but also how do composers actually use conventions of this chosen mode of storytelling to create meaning. So This is where we need to think about the different modes of storytelling. Think about the ones that you engage with the most, right? Movies, books, um, music, maybe, right? Or lyrical poetry, right? So think about the conventions that are used. So in movies, we see, for example, the use of shots, camera shots, and angles, like, right, to create meaning. So a close up to of a character, something to show vulnerability, to maybe show specific emotions. Long sorry Yeah, a long shot of something to show that bigger picture and to really capture the person. um or like a high camera angle or a low camera angle. So a low camera angle to make the person seem really really powerful, really intimidating. A high camera angle to achieve the opposite effect. So those are made storytelling. In books, the use of, for example, structure, so the linearity of the book, if it's linear or non-linear, the use of characterization to create characters to have a certain effect. The use of fragmentation. So some texts, especially next year, you'll come across texts that are fragmented, that have these, and you'll see sometimes this with movies as well, like the linearity and fragmentation, how the text is broken up into pieces so you can put pieces together. So the convention of story, like the conventions of the chosen mode of storytelling, are used to portray a specific meaning. And having an understanding of that, we can then translate that into how can we use conventions of storytelling to achieve a certain effect. So this is essentially what the process looks like. So essentially, we begin by analyzing essentially technical features and crafts in a variety of different texts. So these are texts from your own wide reading, and also texts that you will look at in class, and then we use that to compose our own piece of writing, and we do that by combining and transforming the influences that we've had. And then after doing that, we reflect on our creative choices, and our creative choices, our influences, and our processes. So you can the key here is that after reading a text, you can either imitate or you can transform the technical features of that text. So what that means is you can either use, for example, the techniques in the same way that they have been used in the original text, or you can change those techniques in the way they're used in your text to achieve a specific meaning. And it's usually the latter that it's done, because our purpose will be different to the author's purpose that we're reading. One key thing that reminds me of is that whenever you're writing, always think to yourself, what is my purpose here? What is my authorial intent? And that will set you up for success in Module C, because it means that you are not just writing for the sake of writing, but you actually have a purpose there. So yeah, you'll compose imaginative, discursive, persuasive, and hybrid forms of writing. And once you have done that, you reflect on it, and you will reflect on it, and you will also consider why, for example, you've chosen that form. Now, one thing we'll talk about is discursive text. So that's probably the word that stood out at you. So you know what imaginative text is. You probably know what a persuasive text is from years of writing persuasive speeches in primary school. You know, school uniform shouldn't be banned, and so on. So let's talk about a discursive text. What is it? So a discursive text essentially is a text in which we are exchanging ideas. It's a discourse where there is a verbal interchange of ideas. There is debate and discussion. So essentially, discursive writing, as defined by NESA, so the NSW Education Standards Authority, that make your exam papers as well. So they say that discursive writing is a text whose primary focus is to explore an idea or a variety of topics. These texts involve the discussion of an idea or opinion without the direct intention of persuading the reader, listener, or viewer to adopt any single point of view. So essentially, in this type of text, you're taking one idea, you're discussing different elements of it. So think of it as like you're taking one idea and you're branching off into different directions, and you're giving me lots of ideas and opinions on it, but you're not actually persuading me to pick one, or you're not saying that you may be presenting me with different ideas, but you're not saying this is the one you should pick. And like in persuasive writing, obviously, where you're like, I firmly believe, right? So that's not the case here with discursive writing. And most schools teach discursive writing as either a personal essay or as a creative nonfiction form. So we have a literary style, but we also need to have a concrete subject matter in order to write a solid discursive writing. So essentially, a discursive text bounces back and forth from opposing views. So it's taking one idea and it is discussing the various elements of it, and it doesn't follow a set structure. So there's no set structure, unlike persuasive and creative. So with creative, usually the structure is, you know, that the beginning, the complication, resolution sort of thing. It does change a bit in year 12 because you have a bit more freedom with form, but that's, you know, usually generally the thing with creative writing. In terms of sorry, my voice just changed there. In terms of persuasive writing, again, we, you know, the form is the structure is pretty conventional. So introduction, 3 body paragraphs and arguments, and a conclusion. So yeah, with discursive writing, there is no set structure. It contains a personal spin, and it also uses literary features. So you still need to use things like, like, you know, your techniques in writing. So you're going to be using techniques in any writing that you do, but with discursive writing, some techniques that generally work really well include anecdotes, humor, imagery, the extended metaphor, the use of motif or irony, and also experimentation with form. Okay, so this could be a sample structure for a discursive piece of writing. Again, you don't necessarily have to follow this, but this could be one way to go. So for example, you could have an introduction that can be like a creative opening, or it could be an anecdote. Anecdotes are a good place to start. And this part basically introduces the question, and it introduces your like the structure of your writing, like the arguments you're going to use and how you're going to present them. And then from there, paragraph 1 and 2, 3, and 4. So essentially what happens is you can begin by expressing one opinion or perspective, answering the question. Paragraph 2 could be another opinion, paragraph 3 is another opinion or perspective, and paragraph 4 is another opinion and perspective. So you are basically taking one idea and you're branching off in different directions. And finally, the conclusion could be either you determining a final answer or conclusion, right? So actually going, okay, this is what I think, this is what my opinion is finally. And that, if you're going to do that, you can only do that at the end, by the way. You can't do it in the middle or at the beginning, because then it's not a discursive anymore. If you're trying to persuade someone of your opinions, you can only do it at the end and express a firm opinion, or you can leave it open-ended and unanswered so that the reader can actually make that choice. Either way works. Yeah, just pick whichever one you like. So now let's have a look at the creative aspect of reading to write, right? So like what that includes. So the key principles are that a good creative piece should have, firstly, a strong concept or thesis. It should also have a deliberately crafted structure. It should also be clever, but sparing in the use of techniques. So what that means is we don't want to overuse techniques. We want to use them subtly and effectively. So not like, we don't want to use them throughout the writing, we just want to use them where they really fit. And finally, simple plot. So creative writing, one of the key things and with creative writing that I see is students trying to do a whole lot in a very limited amount of time. Avoid doing that because that is not going to be very helpful. Just aim to have a simple plot. A simple plot will go a long way, because you only have, and especially in exam situations, like in year 11, you may have like 50 minutes or even an hour to write, depending on how generous your teacher is and how they design the assignment. But the HSC, for this section, for Module C, you literally only have 40 minutes, just 40 minutes to do it. So you don't have a lot of time to, create a universe, to pull a Harry Potter or a Marvel, create universe, create characters, have a very cool storyline. That one works. Just a simple plot, a simple, effective plot. Okay, so how do you actually do it? Well, so firstly we begin in the pre-writing stage. So this is where we generate ideas and we explore concepts, and they can come from reading, they can come from our own reading, by like drawing on prescribed text, looking at ideas in a wide reading, and you can also essentially start like journaling and writing a lot by yourself. So you can, find ideas. And finally, using writing prompts. So writing prompts like, what is the first story you remember? Describe a family ritual, or write about a character setting an unusual a New Year's resolution. So writing prompts, and you can find so many on the internet, and you can use these as well. They can be really helpful as well, because it just gives you a place to start. And sometimes that's the hardest part of writing, is to find a place to start. Okay. So, here are other places that you can also find lots of ideas. So use anecdotes and personal experiences. You can look at, again, ideas online. You can be inspired by, for example, the books you read. You can think about what is happening in the world. And find artwork generator website. That could be another way to go. And just be inspired by just things that you come across. Like, for example, a news article, the millionaire tells millennials, if you want a house, stop buying avocado toast. So you could write a story about that. Whatever sparks that creativity, use it to write. So let's have a look at what this process of writing looks like, because you'll be doing it this year. And in fact, it probably is like a really good idea to even just start by like just literally taking like 15 minutes to write today. Like, maybe once this lecture's over, if you have time, if you can find a bit of time, just set like a 15-minute timer and just write about anything at all. Write about the tree outside your window. And I say that because the one outside mine right now is shaking violently because of the wind. You can write about that. You can write about your morning coffee. You can write about this lecture if you wanted to. I don't know what you write though. Maybe like just a random girl going on and on about English. I don't know, right? But you can write about anything, and I think it's a really good practice, just to maybe like set a 10-15 minute timer and just put your head down and write, and don't stop, don't read over it. That's the first thing is, and I say that because I took like a little writing unit last semester, and some people question that. They're like, why would you do that? Like, my friends were like, why would you do that to yourself? And I was like, I actually like writing, but nonetheless, if you are, like, just set a timer and just do it. Even when you're doing this for assignments and you want to get that initial start and you just can't get it, set a timer and literally start writing about anything. You can use a prompt if you like. You can use an image to inspire you, but just start writing. Don't read over it. Don't think about it. Just write. Because if you read over it or if you think about it, you're gonna think, oh, this is pretty terrible, right? Or, oh my god, what is the idea? Oh, how terrible is my writing? And that just throws you off. So don't think about it, don't edit it. I think we have that little critical editor in all of us that's just immediately going to be like, yeah, nah, this is not good. Don't let it shine. Just take 15 minutes, just literally write without any, just write without thinking about it. And then, go back after a while to look over it and see if you can find any ideas that you can then develop for your assignments, for school, or for, ultimately your year 12 HSC piece. So, write your first draft, let it be terrible. Start from whatever gives you inspiration. Write quickly, that's the thing. Write quickly. Do not edit yourself. Do not edit yourself. That's the key here. Then let it rest. Then come back. Time's a really good mentor here. Be harsh when you come back to it. Take out things that you don't need, and then write out a plan to solidify that concept. And then revising part of it is then thinking then thinking about these specific things, right? So firstly, solidifying your concept. Having a strong concept is really important. Heightening certain emotions and details. Experimenting with form is a really good thing to do, and a really good habit of getting into. And then finally, think about the marker. What would the marker think like a marker? You know, if this was someone else's piece, would you, how many marks, okay, don't think how many marks you would give, but then think about the feedback if this was someone else's piece. Things to cut out: avoid cliches. Cliches are cliches. Don't use them. Telling, not showing. One of the key things that we see with with writing is telling and not showing. So don't do that. Show, don't tell. Melodrama is another one. Cut it out. Overindulgent prose. This is where, like, the way I like to think about it is because I actually definitely was a victim of it, or rather, I used to use this a lot. Was overindulgent prose, like having very flowery, sort of very flowery, very descriptive writing. Sometimes it takes away from the meaning. And finally, avoid writing about extremely sensitive subject matters, because this is the HSC. It's being marked by teachers. Like, just avoid anything that's too sensitive for this purpose. Okay, so let's now have a look at ways to stand out with your responses. So firstly, experimenting with form, that's really good. And again, if you start doing it now, you'll feel comfortable by the time you get to year 12. Write diary entries and letters, for example. So now here's the thing: you don't have to literally write like a fiction story, or you don't just have to write like a prose. You can make it like a newspaper article, you can make it a diary entry, you can make it a letter as well. And you can use fragmentation, but with fragmentation be careful that it's still like it still makes sense. And you can also use a non-linear timeline. Again, be careful with this, because if you want to use like a flashback or something, you just have to make sure it's done in a certain way. And then you can also have a unique narrative voice, and you'll come across these features more when you study a lot of the texts next year that look at like the experiment with form, the experiment with narrative voice. But when it comes to narrative voice, think about having unreliable narrators, for example, who, yeah, we don't know if they're telling us the truth or not. A good example of that is, for example, Nick from The Great Gatsby. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure his name was Nick, but if I'm getting it wrong and you watch the movie, it's the character, again played by Tobey Maguire. So that's that, having unreliable narrators. Unlikable protagonist, like, changing stuff up a bit and having an unlikable protagonist is another way to do it. Infused with personal qualities of character, for example, sarcastic, insecure, pretentious, defensive. That can also be, so even if it's like a narrator, like a third person narrator, we could still have these personal qualities. And having a satirical narrative voice, it's difficult, but it is achievable. So you have to research a bit and read a couple of texts that also have that, and then try and adapt it to your own writing. Use interesting techniques, things like motifs, synecdoche, irony. So synecdoche is basically a technique where like it's done to like achieve a dehumanization part. So you basically like dehumanize a person by talking about them in fragments. So like text where it's like, for example, in poetry we see it a lot where it might just talk about someone's hands, or like a good example of this is T.S. Eliot, if you have heard about him, and he does it a bit where he just like talks about someone's hands or hair, or neck or something, and that's basically like detaching the person as a whole by talking about specific body parts. And also have specific details and emotions that allow nuance and complex portrayal rather than having cliches. Okay. And there's a really good there's a really good tweet there. I can fix him, but also I can make him worse. Well, I can ruin his life for the sake of character development. So you are the author, you're in control, you can do whatever as long as you do it effectively. So yeah, when writing creatively, you need to draw inspiration from the text you've studied during reading to write. You need to draw on conceptual and technical features, and this means you will imitate the conventions they use, their grammar, their literary device, as well as you can also imitate themes and ideas. Thinking about show don't tell, really really important. Ask yourself if you've said if what you have said can be said in a way that can be implied instead. So, for example, instead of saying Susie was cold, we can say the dialogue, so we can use dialogue. It's quite chilly outside, isn't it? Susie commented, which tells us she's cold because she thinks it's chilly. We can use action, so she wrapped the scarf around her neck like a boa constrictor. Or setting, an icy breeze circled the room. Standing right underneath the air conditioner, Susie shivered. And that's another one. That was a bit of a tongue twister. Susie shivered. Yeah, I'm glad it wasn't like 3 S's there. Yeah, so many ways to show and not tell. So make sure you use one of those ways to show and not tell. Different text times. Use poems, letters, diary entries to draw from more personal and authentic pieces, and you can also write your own. Experiment and see if they would work nicely in the context of your piece. So, alrighty, so there's that, and an important tip. Firstly, be aware of the believability of your writing. Maintain control over the piece and tone of the speakers in your piece as well. Have alternate endings, plot points, settings, like that can always be helpful. Craft of writing in year 12, but also reading to write, like the questions you can get sometimes can be unpredictable, right? So prepare for any possibility. So the thing with this is the more you write, the more you'll feel comfortable with an idea or a character or a certain narrative voice, and the more you can adapt that as well. And also have a perspective, even if it's written from multiple perspectives. Show what your main point is. Now, firstly, don't write anything that goes nowhere. So even if it returns back to how it started, something should be gained from reading. So even if you have like that circular ending, the reader should have still gained something. Sorry. Yeah, the reader should have still gained something. There should have been a purpose. Secondly, writing with no message or purpose. Remember the key thing that I said earlier was, sorry. Oh, it's coming. No, it's not coming. Always happens, literally. Where was I? Oh, there we go. Okay, so writing with no purpose or message. Now that is like one of the key mistakes people make. Remember, don't just write for the sake of writing. Always make sure that there is a purpose behind it. And again, in the context of year 12, it's the last piece of writing you'll ever do, literally in English. So what message do you want to, leave them with as well? So that's another way to think about it. So always have a purpose, an authorial intent. That's the first thing to determine before you start your writing. So let's have a look at how to read a Module C text. So firstly, think about how does your prescribed text serve as a technical model, right? So that's there. And then looking at form, language techniques, style and voice. So this is obviously for Module C for next year, but it's also for the text that you look at in reading to write. So yeah, think about how does your prescribed text serve as a technical model, and then you can borrow from the structure perspective or linearity, and you can also borrow and be inspired by the style or the voice of the writing as well. So that could be like if the writer sounds, for example, optimistic, sarcastic, intellectual, and you can use that and apply that to your own writing. And when it comes to incorporating the technical features, so in whichever text that you read, when it comes to incorporating those technical features, you can either imitate them, so have the same technique and same purpose, but more than likely, you'll be transforming it. So it might be the same technique but new purpose, because your purpose as an author will be different to what the original author by whom you're inspired would have written about. Oh, sorry, and you can also play with the technique. You can have a different purpose. Finally, reflections. You will be asked to, and you can be asked to justify the ways in which you were inspired by the text, both technically and conceptually. And so that just means, conceptually means like the concepts and the themes and the writing. So you can be inspired by them to either imitate or transform. So this is what it may look like. If you're imitating if you're imitating the technical features of the text here, for example. So let's say this was a text. So Zadie Smith's interjections of hyperbole into her personal narration to viscerate the horrifying methods of other writers reveals how the process of writing is highly individualized. So if we have that, we can imitate that language technique by saying that similarly, given that my story is in the highly personal form of a diary entry, the protagonist frequently expresses herself hyperbolically, exasperated with her inability to articulate a photo that represents her history. In turn, the reader is similarly frustrated by the imprecisions of language as such an individualized medium. But you can also transform it. So, for example, we can say that in McCann's writing, so McCann playfully fragments his work to mimic the disjointed process through which writing evolves. And we can use that, and we can transform that, and we can transform the form that is there, and we can say that the sample utilizes an epistolary form, grafting together fragmented journal entries to likewise evoke a frustration at the disjointed process. This vexation is accentuated by exchanging numbered fragments to dated ones, marking the slow speed at which ideas take shape. So, when it comes to writing reflections, think about the reflections in the same way you'd write like a mini essay. So basically, you're justifying what you have written. And what I'll do here is I'll just quickly unpack these. So essentially, like, don't stress too much about the structure right now, but because this sort of mainly links back to module C more than reading to write in year 11, because the reflections will be a bit like mark wise, they'll be less significant in year 11. But you can either talk about the themes you've sort of discussed in your text. You can talk about formal language. You can also organize your reflection according to the techniques you've used or the structure. And the internal paragraph can look something like talking about the technique in the prescribed text. So your whichever text that you've read in reading to write, having a quote and linking to their purpose. You can also have a technique which is influenced by the prescribed text, quote, link to purpose, and then original technique from your own piece, quote, and link to purpose. So we're going to see where the emphasis is here, and that is relating essentially the original technique to our chosen convention of storytelling. So during your study of reading to write, remember these important things. You must be not only considering but also evaluating how well a composer has used the conventions of a genre or form to create meaning. In turn, you must draw from this evaluation to inform your own creative or discursive writing, and also use it to create similar or different meaning in your own text. So, before beginning though, as you can see in reading to write, it is important to understand the conventions of different forms and genres of writing. And this is mostly assumed knowledge from years 7 to 10. So if you don't understand what I mean by these conventions, make sure that, this is basically the techniques, and you should hopefully be familiar with these as well. Another thing is that the more diverse you read, the better it is, because they will give you lots of ideas as well. Perfect. Let's now have a look at essay writing. Alrighty. So here we are with year 7 to 10, right? English was dedicated to the building of foundations, right? That's what you essentially did. You should know how to structure and write a basic body paragraph discussing themes and ideas, and be able to then use textual evidence to support your writing. So using that, you will then be able to elevate your own writing and be able to learn how to integrate your personal voice into your writing. That's what we want to do. So now, the biggest piece of advice that I have for essay writing for you guys is that no matter how well you typically do in English, focus on paragraph structure, focus on integrating your analysis into your writing. At the end of the day, the HSC will be you sitting in a room and writing. So you can see how important it is to make sure that our writing is effective and it is sophisticated. So essentially, the cake analogy and debunking the ultimate myth. So what that means is essentially with that, we want to make sure that within our essay, we have layers, like, right? So we want to have a point, we want to then have our evidence, we want to evaluate that, we want to talk about, we want to evaluate that, insert our own personal voice. So there has to be that structure. That is really, really important. We can't just mix everything together and, hope that we get a perfect cake, right? So that's not how it works. We need to make sure that there are essentially individual layers, on top of each other, in our writing. That's what we need to have in our essays. So that's really important. Now, I will introduce you to a key idea here, which is thesis writing. You probably would have already engaged with it a bit, but thesis writing is really important, and it becomes super important in year 11. So a good thesis says two things. Firstly, it says that you understand the question, and secondly, it says that this is your proposed answer to the question. So whenever you're given a question, the first thing in your introduction is a thesis. It's your thesis. It's your understanding of the idea. So what that means is, instead of just restating the question or just using like vague qualifiers like significantly to a great extent, you need to actually understand the question and elaborate on it. And what that means is the thesis has to be your interpretation of the question and your overarching idea for your essay. So this does not necessarily mean regurgitating words of the question. Like, that's the key thing that I always see with essays, is just repeating parts of a question. We don't want to do that. We want to take that question, break it down, build on it, and then give our answer to it. So for example, if this is our question, a good text has something to say and says it well. Margaret Atwood's timeless The Handmaid's Tale is creative and precise about its form, style, literary devising, allowing it to contest patriarchal values and limitations. That's our answer. We are elaborating on it. We're saying it's a good text because it uses form, style, and language to actually achieve and to actually say something about a certain idea. And another idea could be, for that, for example, Margaret Atwood's exploration of female sexuality serves as a revelation of the patriarchal constraints on female self-expression. And that's a second argument that we can tie into that initial one. So it's our thesis plus our specific ideas that are relevant to the question. Really important. So when it comes to paragraph structure, this is what it sort of should mirror, right? So we have a concept statement. So we introduce the idea, we link it to the question, and we link it to the thesis. We then have our elaboration. So this is where we see this idea emerge, and we elaborate on the idea. We can possibly bring in form here, and we want to introduce the concept as well. Then we have analysis, right? So evidence one, we extract technique and we discuss the impact of technique in the quote and also on the audience as well. And we repeat that at least 3 times. So that's really important because we need to actually have at least 3 pieces of evidence. So maybe in year 10, in year 9, you may have been using maybe 2 pieces of evidence or even 1. We want to make sure that we now have at least 3 pieces of evidence. That is really, really important. And the really key thing that I like to use is essentially the key formula that I like to use is QTE when it comes to the actual analysis. So for example, if I've got evidence 1, I've got my technique, and I discuss the impact of the technique in the quote and on the audience. I want to repeat that 3 times. The key that I like to use here is called QTEL. So I will introduce my quote, I will introduce the technique, I will then elaborate on the effect of the quote. What is the quote doing? Sorry, what is the technique doing? Sorry. And then I will link it back to the question. And a lot of times I see the link back to the question is the bit that's not done very well by students because we don't do it that often in year 11 and 12. So we just want to make sure that in year 11 and 12, we're doing that. Really, really important. And we want to make sure that the link back to the question is the key here. Awesome. So that is the concept statement, the elaboration, and then the link back. Now, remember, your marker cannot read your mind. So you can't assume that they are going to know essentially what you're thinking. So you may have chosen an idea and it links back to your idea and you've got your personal voice and you have an idea. However, if you don't elaborate on it and if you don't link it back to the question to show how it's relevant, essentially then it won't work because the marker can't see, they can't read inside your mind, right? They can't read your mind. They can't know what you are trying to achieve. So in your head, it may make sense, but it could mean that in actual writing, it may not. Like in your actual essay, it may not be coming through. So you need to make that link really, really clear. Okay, awesome. So now let's have a look at a common mistake that I see students making. In essay writing is that firstly what they do is they state the evidence, they state the corresponding literary technique, and they just relate it to the big idea, and that doesn't quite work, because of the fact that it's not quite linking back, right? We need to make sure that we actually don't just stay with the technique is and be like the use of symbolism in this allows us to see the text link back to whatever. Like that's very general. Remember, the technique is achieving, like it's there to achieve a certain purpose. So instead what you should be doing is that you should state your evidence, you should state what your evidence is, you should say what your evidence is, right? And you should link it back to the technique, and you should then describe the effect of the technique in the quote. That is the key. Like, describe the effect of the technique and what it's doing, and then link it back. So that is really important. Beforehand. Alrighty. So let's now have a look at what you should do next. So once you have described the effect of the technique, then you want to evaluate the effect of the technique and the quote on the audience. What is it trying to achieve? What is it urging the audiences to think about? So that's really important. And remember, this is where you can also link back to context, to what is the author trying to achieve through the technique and what effect is it having on the audience in light of the context, in light of the authorial purpose, and then you relate it back to the big idea. So if you can actually really focus on that and drill down on that, that's going to be really helpful, and that is basically the key to analysis in year 12. So if you get that down and you can use this in year 11 and practice applying this in year 11, when you come into year 12, you'll find that your job has become so much easier, and that's one of the things that always sort of tends to throw off students. Is the fact that because we haven't done so much of the analysis, when you come into year 12, it can feel like you haven't done it before. It can feel a bit intimidating, and it can take time to actually apply this concept. So if you start applying this now in year 11, you'll feel comfortable in year 12. So let's have a look at what I actually mean, because I've told you what it is, but let's show you what that actually means. So instead of saying, through the use of metaphor, in her pain was a bullet, lodging deeper and deeper into her soul, the composer demonstrates the theme of hardship, as he figuratively states the adversity of the protagonist. So you can see here, I've got the technique, I've got the quote, but I'm just linking back to the main idea. I'm linking it back to the theme of the paragraph. I'm not actually breaking down the quote. So what I should be doing is this. The composer's use of metaphor and repetition to try to use multiple techniques in her pain was a bullet lodging deeper and deeper into her soul personifies the adversity of the central protagonist and illustrating how incessant the protagonist's trauma is. This crafting is quite impactful in portraying the experience of hardship that the protagonist endures to readers, where they understand the power and suffering attributed to the protagonist's hardship. So here we link it back, we elaborate on it. So if I just go back, we've got the evidence here, we've got the technique here, we describe the effect of the we have described the effect of the technique, so how it personifies the adversity of the protagonist, and then we have the effect that it has on readers. It's quite impactful on readers, and then we link it back to the big idea here. That's what we want to aim to do. One important note is that do not approach every essay the same way. One of the biggest mistakes that students make is approaching all the essays the same way. Every essay must be approached, written, marked according to each module. So you will be, for every different module, you will be writing a different essay. So you can't have the same structure every paragraph for every essay. Like, it can't be the same. So we don't want to copy that over. But those elements will be similar. They will be similar. You want to have all the same elements. Like, you want to do all 5 things that we just looked at, but the way in which you talk about it, the way in which you structure it will be different each time. And so as you build up your notes, think about the different ideas you have and how you could make paragraphs from them. So from there, think about all the different paragraphs and how they can be linked together. With your essays, every paragraph should be building on one another. So all the ideas essentially should all then link back to the main question. That's the key here. So if my question is, ice creams are the most delicious dessert, to what extent do you agree with this question or something? That's my question. I'm going to say my thesis will be that ice cream is so yummy. The ice creams are indeed the best dessert ever. And then my 3 paragraphs could be: firstly, chocolate ice cream is yummy; secondly, vanilla ice cream is yummy; and thirdly, strawberry ice cream is yummy. So we have the same idea, but the arguments branch off our thesis. They branch off this big idea here. Awesome. That's the essay. So I haven't gone through the modules, but I have gone through what the elements of essay writing is, and if you apply those elements, like I said, you have access to these slides. Save them, come back to them, maybe take some of the notes on the key steps of essay writing. If you apply that, you will find yourself feeling comfortable with analysis and with essay writing. So now let's have a look at note taking and practice questions. When it comes to short answer questions, you will be preparing for this for next year, but I'm just introducing you to short answer questions. This is where your typical peel, steal, teal works best. So essentially you're given a question, you have a point sentence which is a direct response to the question. You then have an elaboration sentence where you explain why you have this view, how you got it, evidence, and you summarize. So the best thing when it comes to short answer questions is practicing. You won't need it as much in year 11 as you would in year 12, but I've attached some practice questions to these slides at the end. I've given you some images to think about, and essentially I want you to just have a go at these, right? So again, the responses you write, the first response you write won't be that band 6 top-notch response, and that's okay. But using this structure, you can try and answer the question. You can try and just see how it feels. So best thing you can do is practice. It is annoying, it is time consuming, but just read over the abstracts, look at the picture, try to pick out techniques. That's really important. Pick out techniques, and even if you just want to look at those images and do like a QTEL, so pick out techniques, talk about the technique, the effect, and the link. Well, this will get you moving, and just practicing the analysis can be so helpful for next year. Add a question to the mix. You can just identify a bullet point, and then if you do this a few times, you'll see patterns and like the techniques that you find in images. And again, one of the key things that students struggle with in year 12 is like being able to deconstruct those unseen questions and find techniques in those questions. So tips for short answer questions is asking how, essentially, short answer questions, think about the how, right? And that's asking for you to talk about the literary devices. It asks you to discuss a certain topic or a theme. And just like in an essay, you need to be specific about how the composer is portraying the theme. Think about in what ways it's happening. So be specific about the ways in which the composer is doing that, and familiarize yourself with non-generic literary techniques. So using different techniques and broadening your horizon there. So a great study technique that I use for for example, for short answer questions was just getting random images or prose fiction extracts and then just analyzing them for techniques. So if you look at this, for example, right, analyze this for techniques. Look at, for example, the caption, the bold caption. Think about the gesture here. Think about the significance and the symbolism of, for example, the media capturing the violence here. So think about all of that, right? And you can see both are saying don't shoot. Look at the irony of that. So those are some techniques that I've just thrown out there. Irony, symbolism, the irony, the symbolism, the caption, right? Sorry, the speech marks, also the salience of the image as well. So think about these concepts, and maybe if you just want to use the techniques that I've just thrown out and write a sentence about the effect of each technique. What is it doing? Here's another image. I'll leave this one for you to think about for techniques. I'm just going to move through, so we are getting close to time. Here is another one, right? So think about these techniques. Really think about what is it trying to tell you, and the more you do this, the better you'll get at it. And now, finally, let's talk about some tips for Year 11. Here are some key tips. Firstly, my tips for note taking. Make tables. Tables are great, and one of the key things that I tell even U12 students who are like, oh, it's getting close to the HSC, how should I be studying, how should I be making my notes, I always say the first thing you do is get your quotes, make tables, like get a quote table. So that's where you have your theme idea, you have your evidence and analysis, you link it back to the context, and you link it to the rubric. And this table, and the idea is that you just take it with you. Well, obviously you don't take the actual paper with you into the exam room, but you take the table, you remember it, you remember your analysis, you remember your links, you remember and you understand that, and you understand it, you take it with you into the exam room, and whatever question is given, you're able to mold this to that question. Remember, okay, another key tip for year 12 is do not memorize your essays. I cannot stress it enough. Do not memorize your essays. I do not recommend it at all. It is more trouble than it's worth. So don't memorize essays. You may find it working once or twice out of pure luck, but it is not going to be the most effective way to do this. In fact, you want to focus on understanding your techniques, understanding your analysis, having a really, really good understanding of it, and being able to take it with you into the exam room. So use notes from earlier or a variation as they mimic the structure of your paragraphs. Memorize early. So memorize your quotes early. Don't memorize your essay, but memorize your quotes, because you're going to take the same quotes. Slowly begin with practice papers. Submit your practice papers for feedback. Again, can't stress it enough. If you won't get feedback on it, you won't know where you're making those mistakes, and you won't be able to improve on them. That's really, really important. Don't lose your notes. Put them in a folder categorized by subject. Yeah, don't lose them. Stay on top of it. Yep, stay on top of your notes. Seriously, don't leave it till last minute. Ask for help. Always participate in class discussions. Class discussions are a great way to actually help your own understanding of things, to actually increase your own understanding. So make sure that you participate in class discussions, and we've already discussed it quite a bit. Get your hands on as many resources as you can. Use Ada Notes website. You can use you can get past papers on HSC, ACE HSC, and also Facebook discussion groups and stuff. Even though I know most people are probably like, Facebook, because we don't use it as much anymore. However, you can always find some really good stuff on those groups. So yeah, just check it out, as long as you're not obviously procrastinating on Facebook rather than using it for resources. Now, before studying a text in class, read your syllabus, break it down into the most important features, right? Then read briefly on the context of the text. Context is really important. Do not brush over it. Make an A4 page of notes. Get context, because everything links back to context, because context and authorial purpose is the reason why the person has written their text. Collaborate with your class and read the text. Read the text. Do not just read summaries, read the text. Briefly identify quotes and sections that you think will be helpful. That can be really helpful. While you study a text in class, have, for example, match up excerpts you study in class with the syllabus, so try to draw those links between the text and the syllabus. Listen for recurring themes. Make notes of those that are emphasized by your teachers. So so that's really important as well. Like discussion, listening to what the key themes are, and then being able to use that, disagree with them or agree with them, and develop your own personal voice. Read academic papers. It's again, just start small. You don't have to read the whole thing. Do not read the whole thing. Skim, read abstracts. Your teacher may have access to subscription services. The state library has access. That's like the best way. Your school library may or may not have access. Alrighty. So, immediately after studying a text in class, record your quotes, right? That's really important. If you found some good quotes, record them. And then make sure you've recorded the name and title of your papers if you're going to take notes from critic papers. And you can, again, put it in a table. Tables can be really helpful because it definitely helps you like break each of these ideas down. So for example, this is what it may look like. And these are some sample notes from one of our awesome tutors here at ShootSmart. It's their notes, and you can see how well it's done and how well it's made up. So there we are, some more examples, put it together. It looks really good to you after you're done as well. So yeah, and then you can make posters. You can, studying doesn't have to be boring. If you like putting things together, if you have that creative streak, use it. And that is me. That is it from me today. Guys, thank you so much for joining today's lecture and for watching. I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. No matter what English you're doing, no matter which year you're in, I think there's a lot to take away from just the key foundational concepts. Try and apply them. Be easy on yourself. You're not going to be perfect from the beginning, but if you keep working towards it, you'll get to that level. Good luck in the next 2 years ahead. I hope I see you again in another Ada Notes lectures. There's still a couple of minutes left, so feel free to ask Kayla more questions. I am confident she probably helped you smash all of those questions out. But yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you so much. I wish you all the very, very best for the 2 years ahead. Take care of yourselves, look after yourselves mentally and physically. You're gonna need it, and approach this year with a growth mindset. Alrighty, good luck guys, have a wonderful year, and yeah, take care. See you guys.